Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. One of the more hot topics in the community with Warzone 2 and MW2, really ever since the launch of each game respectively, is the movement. Obviously, coming off of 3 years almost of Warzone 1, with that specific movement being very fast, very arcadey with the slide canceling and the bunny hopping and the very fast-paced action, compared to this year with MW2 and Warzone 2, things being slowed down a lot. It's got a lot of people talking. Is it better to have this more tactical and slowed down version? Is it better to have the more arcadey and speedy and fast version of MW2019 and Warzone 1? It's been a back and forth battle ever since day one, really, right? And we've seen some quote-unquote movement changes so far here in Warzone 2 and MW2. They've sped up the delay in which when you dolphin dive, you can't shoot your gun. They've sped up the velocity of the sliding here recently, but we haven't seen anything drastic happen to movement, at least yet. It does actually appear that we could potentially, keyword potentially, be seeing some significant movement updates in MW2 and Warzone 2 in the future, given the feedback that Infinity Ward and Raven and the other dev studios get, because recently they've sent out a community survey. Now, this doesn't go to every single member of the community for some reason. We'll talk more on this here in a bit, but they basically email out a survey and they ask a bunch of questions, and they've done this a handful of times in the past with other significant gameplay elements that ultimately had game-changing decisions made because of the feedback that the community provided. And this time the survey was all about movement, right? And I don't want to just focus on the movement of, slide canceling. Everyone says this game needs movement, and the first thing they resort to is, we don't need slide canceling, or we have to have slide canceling. As this sort of survey says, there's a lot more to the overall movement in this game and in MW2 and Warzone 2 and DMZ than just simply slide canceling, right? So this information, it's stemming from Modern Warzone. He was the one who actually ended up initially posting what this survey was asking of. Basically, there's 5 options for every single question that they ask, or every single movement option that they ask about. Whether you think it's just right, whether you think it's somewhat too slow, somewhat too fast, much too fast, or much too slow. And those who got this survey are able to answer these out. And here's all the areas of focus that they are trying to pay attention to and get feedback on when it comes to the overall movement. Initially, one of the larger ones, the sliding speed and transition and the time of the animation from sliding to standing and crouching. So that would more so be close to slide canceling, right? They also are, though, looking at the reload speed. This is kind of interesting because obviously this year they did take out the ability to reload cancel, which has been a thing in Call of Duty for some time now. And then also just like the general reload speeds, we don't have many options for like fast mags or anything this year, like we have a lot in the past as well. That was definitely a big change there that surprised a lot of people. They're also looking at mantling and traversing walls and surfaces. They've done some to increase the fluidity of the mantling. That was a big thing with Season 3, but honestly, most of the time, I don't find myself mantling that much. The climbing speed. This is kind of an interesting one when it comes to climbing up surfaces. Again, it's something that you'd sort of expect. I'm surprised they're actually focusing on this one in particular and trying to gauge feedback on this, because it's not something I would have even thought about, because I don't really pay much attention to the speed at which I'm climbing. More so I'm paying attention to why I can't mantle over or jump up on the tiny little rock in front of my character, right? Like, trained combat character here, guy's a machine, but I can't jump over this tiny little pebble in front of me sometimes. So that's kind of an interesting one there. This is another important one, the sprint to fire speed, the weapon pullout animation immediately after sprinting time. Obviously much slowed down in this game, and you really have to work on adding in a ton of sprint to fire based attachments if you want it to be decent. And then if you do that, you're probably killing your range or your control and making the weapon not really all that versatile. The strafing speed is another pretty important one. You can add in some attachments to help out with this, but we've got nothing like, say, the Mac 10 from back in the day, which had an insane strafe speed, or nothing similar to that. The shooting while / after jumping. Obviously, the bunny hopping mechanic in this game was a lot more prevalent during the beta stages of MW2, and then now after full launch of MW2 and Warzone 2, not really that common of a technique because it doesn't really exist too much, and there are some decent penalties when you are shooting and trying to jump and do the jump shot animations. They're also looking at the stance transition speed from crouching to standing to prone, so your speed to drop shot. Again, that's not something I feel like is too out of the ordinary compared to most CODs. The standard sprinting and walking speed is kind of an important one, how fast you are physically. Now, there is a sort of perceptional change here when you update your FOV. If you go to a higher FOV like 120, it's going to seem like you're running faster or walking faster, when in reality, you're really not, but it's something that is being tracked here. Tack sprinting is another big one. They've really toned down the ability to tack sprint for long periods of time in this game. They've actually nerfed it since launch as well. So curious to see what the feedback would potentially be on this. Of course, they don't share this feedback. It's not like it's a public poll. They're just gathering this internally to make decisions in the future for movement updates, right? That's why this is such an important poll with how hot of a topic this is. Anyways, they're also looking at the moving while crouched speeds, the swimming speeds, which is also kind of interesting, the ADS speeds. So this is another one that's been slowed down quite a bit for several main core weapons in this game compared to previous iterations. Moving while prone, I don't think is ever going to be a big deal because most players aren't moving a ton if they are prone. Then lastly, the dolphin dive speed and the transition of the time from animation of diving to standing and crouching. So they're looking at a lot of areas. Like I said before we went through all these specifics here, when people hear movement changes, they just think about slide canceling, but everything listed here is a movement mechanic. So any updates here would be improvements or potentially the inverse for the movement of this game, depending on the feedback that they get and how they feel they need to actually go about things. Now, here's what I find curious about this. One, I do think that this is an incredibly important poll, and one of the more important ones that they've done in some time, or survey really is what this is. However, it's not a general player-based survey. They email it out to some people, but like I myself, I get all the Call of Duty promotional emails, all that stuff like that. I never got this email. I didn't get a chance to fill out this survey. I know several other people in my friend group that I've asked also haven't seen this come across their inbox. So they're not actually surveying every single player, which is kind of interesting. We're not too sure how they choose who to send this out to and who not to. Also, I feel like the best way to truly gather all data here from the mass player base is to do these kinds of surveys or polls on the menu of the game. Obviously, not everyone who plays Call of Duty is actively checking that email. Now, yes, you do have to sign up with your account and everything, so you're gonna have the email for it, but not everyone is actively looking at that. We know for a fact the largest player base in Call of Duty is the one that doesn't even exist on social media. They don't watch YouTube videos. They don't have Twitter. They're not actively engaging in those conversations. That is the player base majority, whereas the vocal majority is really the player base minority. So having everyone have access to a survey like this and polls like this for anything, whether it's movement, which is a huge thing, maybe it's playlists, maybe it's any other gameplay mechanics, the TTK, maps, all sorts of stuff like that. Having these polls in game would be huge because then you could guarantee every player that's actively on the game would see it, not just the random emails that you sent out, hoping that the players actually, one, see the email, two, interact with it and give you the feedback you're looking for. So while this is indicative of potentially some major movement changes coming to MW2 Warzone 2 and DMZ, there's also a greater conversation here to be had about how useful this survey system could be if they did it in a more, broad way that includes pretty much the entire player base, right? Anyways, with all that being said, those are the potential movement updates we could see here in MW2 Warzone 2 and DMZ if the feedback from the survey comes back and says that the devs need to be adjusting these things and it's not really popular with the player base how things are now. We'll have to wait and see if anything is actually going to stem from this, though. As you guys know, I'll have you covered with any and all news, updates, meta conversations, everything going on in COD is right here, so feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on those post notifications. Also, if you guys enjoyed the video, let me know by dropping a like on it. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, take it easy, have an awesome rest of your day, and I will catch you guys later. Peace out.